Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is Monday, what is it, April 13th? Yep. 2 more days to put in your taxes and have them mailed. And honestly, I don't know if post dated on the 15th is even a good idea. But yeah. Only a couple more days for taxes for anybody who hasn't done those yet. I turned in my taxes personally way too early. We'll do about an hour of warm up, I would say, and then we'll jump into the video game news today. One of the things I was doing today, and I've realized now, as here's one of those ideas that I should have thought of maybe 10 years ago with live streams. If I schedule a time to start somewhat in the future, 10-15 more minutes in the future, that way the YouTube notification system will actually I think it needs to be 30 minutes in the future before the notifications will get pushed at minimum. But yeah, if I set that time, whatever that time is, even if it is slightly inconsistent, and then I just start working on my computer a little bit, as far as little bits of programming or whatever, then I can kill time while still being ready and not getting super distracted away from the computer. I could even set a little timer, come to think of it, to make sure I am ready to go when ready to go. And so yeah, there have been many instances where I have sat down, scheduled it, then got up and walked away, and then gotten distracted with a completely different project in a completely different room, which hasn't helped. Alright, so we'll scroll down the SteamDB 24-hour peak thing. What I was working on was trying to get these pop-ups to go off. It's going to be difficult as far as modifying the JavaScript, so still needs work, but obviously as I've changed a lot on how this 24-hour peak chart looks, this pop-up doesn't make a lot of sense. And you know, these plus buttons also don't make a lot of sense, so they are one thing to get rid of. I did get rid of the footer. That is easier to get rid of, because if you just want something to disappear and it's not based on JavaScript, and I say JavaScript, but honestly it may be called jQuery now, and that the concept of JavaScript overall has just been evolved into jQuery. Or it may be that jQuery is slightly different than JavaScript and both are supported. But almost certainly jQuery would be newer. So yeah, the pop-ups don't make any sense though. Right now it's just visually distracting. There was a point there where I had the screens scrolling, auto-scrolling. And I guess I gave up on that because it was a little too distracting and a little too silly. So what have I been doing over the weekend? I'll put it down to one project and one project only, since I really didn't work on anything else, and that was I had at some point some kind of chemicals, maybe 2 chemicals, very possibly, had spilled under my kitchen sink and turned into this crystalline thing. It was hard, to say the least. A solidified crystalline type substance that it had was stuck to the wood of the cabinet under the sink. And so I had bought some citrus strip, which is a paint stripper, and while I will sing the praises of the citrus strip for not being harsh on your lungs, I can't really sing its praises as an actual paint stripper. It may have helped a lot more than I realized, but it also did not just make it super easy. Of course, I had that extra aspect of the crystalline substance. I mean, and it sounds like I'm talking Star Trek here, but that is probably the best way this substance was. It was like completely hardened, not dissolvable with vinegar, not dissolvable with hydrogen peroxide, not dissolvable with bleach. I think I put acetone on it too, and not dissolvable with that. So it definitely seemed like it was a pretty sturdy thing. And maybe the citrus strip did get under it and in it somewhat to make it easier to scrape it off. But after the Saturday of using citrus strip and making a huge mess, which maybe that's true with all paint strippers, if I was ever going to do another paint stripping project, I'd probably try peel away. But the problem here, I will fully admit, is that I am just getting suggestions from people on YouTube who very possibly have no idea what they're talking about and don't have the long-term experience. And it may very well be the case that whatever paint stripper you would get at a Lowe's or Home Depot is just the more toxic on your lungs, but also more effective thing. Like, particularly if you want it done fast and easy, which I think most people would want it to be done that way for most scenarios. But yeah, citrus strip made a huge pink mess, and I think part of its orange/pinkness is a problem too. If it simply dried white, any place you failed to clean up with an afterwash, which is something I didn't have, and so I just had to use water and isopropyl alcohol as an alternative. But apparently you're supposed to have an afterwash after using paint stripper anyways to stop it from, I suppose, stripping things. Also, I was doing this under a kitchen sink, so I wasn't really trying to do a great job, whereas if I had really done a great job, I would have had masking paper with masking tape on it and bought that and masked off the edges that I didn't want stripped. But yeah, I don't think a citrus strip helped anywhere as much as I was hoping it would. And then I had to spend a lot of Sunday scraping the remaining bits off of it. And what I had done before doing a lot of the scraping was to use a detail sander to try and sand away the crystalline stuff, which honestly I don't think that worked either too well, but it did sand the wood, so like that would have been a thing to do anyways, although maybe I sanded way too much wood. Again, this was my first experimental attempt at doing any of this stuff, and I think for under the sink it's fine, but I don't think I would trust myself to do it anywhere where I actually wanted it to look really good. So yeah, the number one tool that was actually helpful was simply just a scraping tool, a paint scraping tool, not plastic paint stripping scrapers, which I used those, and those were a mess too, just because the citrus strip was a mess. But no, I have a metal scraping tool that has a flat but sharp edge for scraping things up, and even in that case the crystalline substance was still beating it most of the time, and I was having to really just ram it into an edge, find one spot where it's slightly lifted up, and then try and slowly peel from one edge this substance off. And eventually I got it all off, but it was a ton of work, a real ton of work, and I don't know how much I really chipped wood pieces. I could see that I potentially may have chipped as many as a dozen points in the wood. Then I sanded it afterwards, so it kind of doesn't matter, but it would have really mattered again if it wasn't under a kitchen sink. And the wood I was using, the wood under the sink is also very cheap wood. It's like exterior wood, not cabinet wood. Some former owner, whoever built it, was using scrap wood, pretty obviously, because there's a huge amount of gap filler, like over half an inch of gap filler caulk on one side, because obviously they didn't have enough wood to fill in the edge. But yeah, it's kind of a unique problem too. In fairness, I don't think I'll ever run into another situation where it's just a really terrible thing stuck to it that you have to scrape things off. So it would have probably been a day and a quarter's worth of work for me versus 2 days if there was nothing there. But then again, if there was nothing there, I wouldn't have done the project in the first place, because there would have been really no reason to strip off white paint, sand it down, and then put new white paint under a kitchen sink. It would have been way easier, certainly. Well, I suppose if the paint was completely wrong, which is the problem I think I have in some other places. But yeah, if it was just dirty white paint, I would have just repainted it, cleaned it, washed it, dried it, sanded it, then washed it and dried it, and then painted it over. And I had some leftover wall patch paint that I wanted to get rid of, and I had just barely enough, perhaps even slightly less than enough, to do a coat, a single coat of paint once it had all been sanded and down to mostly natural wood. The places where the crystalline substance was still had paint on it, and that's probably the best evidence that the paint stripper of some sort is actually still needed. So I would have potentially, to do it really right, needed to put some more paint stripper on it and try to get rid of every instance of it. But for that type of wood in particular, I just don't think there is a high chance that I would have ever gotten it down to raw wood, nor would it have been pretty as raw wood. Yeah, because it was just like particle board. So I painted it. The paint I had came with a little roller. I tried to use the roller a little bit. Eventually I got bored with using the roller, and I was just plopping the last drops out of the bottle and sticking my gloved fingers into the bottle and getting clumps of paint and just kind of smoothly finger painting into all the edges and crevices, and all the parts I hadn't masked off, white paint. And yeah, it looks, I'm giving myself a huge pass there to say it was a decent job, but I mean, it is under the caveat, it was a decent job for under a kitchen sink, which is also, I've been told you have to wait for the paint to dry and cure for like 2 weeks. Then I'm going to just put shelf liner on it anyways. So nobody's really going to see it. The paint is really there to just seal in the wood so it doesn't get a single drop of water on it and swell, which can be the case. Let's move over to the most wishlisted games at this point. But yeah, with those huge caveats, I think I managed to do a decent first attempt. But I also learned the thing that the whole reason for doing this wasn't to experiment, to see if this would be a project that would just turn out to be super easy with paint stripper, and no, it wouldn't be. It almost never is the case that any kind of home repair or remodeling project is easy. They all turn out to be way more difficult than you want them to be or you think they're going to be. And so yeah, just means I will pay someone else, hopefully a professional, to do the other work I need done. somebody who's probably an expert in that specific field of painting. But yeah, that is pretty much all I did over the weekend. That and watch Supernatural. So now we get into the Supernatural recap. I am at the end of season 11. So there's only 4 more seasons, which means probably by the end of this week, maybe Monday's stream will be the last stream in which I'll have anything to say about Supernatural. Season 11 is the beginning of the final arc, and by far the best arc. In my opinion, just, it's not super surprising, frankly, that would be the case. That after 10 years of doing it, they really start to lock in more. In particular, season 11 is just in like a more modern time, which watching stuff just get mentioned and introduced. Like for a brief time they had paid product placement for Windows 8 in like season 10. And you'll see them mention the internet and hacking, and there's one episode in season 11 where there's a ghost that is just jumping through Wi-Fi and the wireless connections of some sort. But yeah, it just is a more modern era by season 11. And in particular, I would say season 11 is the point where they may have had a different writer, and the times certainly would have changed. So you have like one episode where a fairly famous deaf actor who got several roles shows up, and she's just deaf, and because she's been deaf her whole life, she can't actually pronounce things correctly, which is fairly common. I haven't seen her in a very long time, so I don't know if she's still acting or not. And then you have a gay couple introduced and given a happy ending in one episode in chapter 11 as a gay couple of hunters who actually get to retire, and there's absolutely no gay panic there. And even episodes before then, the whole gay panic and the whole jokes around people being gay instead of gay people just being treated normally and generally respected have gone away. There are even some hints of what I've suggested as far as if you were going to remake Supernatural, in that Lucifer escapes from the cage in season 11, and he is the more evil feeling person who takes over hell for an episode or two, but he doesn't really do anything with that, and they really don't stretch it out as much as it should be. And inherently there is Amara is the threat that is introduced in season 11, where Amara is supposed to be the darkness to God, capital G's light, and technically she's in Supernatural the sister of God, whatever that really means, since they clearly say they don't have parents. But Amara's method of attacking people is incredibly inconsistent, and frankly it would have been more helpful, I think, if you didn't see her make any attacks at all for the whole season, and it was just Lucifer that was the real threat, and doing all the violence. Season 11 also has some of the best side episodes so far. Really good side episodes. And the more mature Sam and Dean, I think, helped there too. But they totally show that when they introduced Amara as the Darkness, they didn't know what her visuals were going to look like when she attacked people. They didn't really know how she was going to attack people. And they've done this power creep thing where the Sister of God is going to be as powerful as God, if not more powerful. And so, how do you depict that and how do you defeat that? And so they go through the notions a lot, trying to slow things down for the 22 episodes of a season, when really every single episode in season 11 should have been focused on trying to defeat Lucifer, and then maybe the last 2 episodes would have been about defeating Mara. They also introduced the British Men of Letters concept at the last second of chapter 11, hinting at the next season. That obviously shouldn't have happened. Like, that should have just been the reveal on episode 1 of season 12. The cliffhanger ending on TV shows in particular, even Supernatural, would have really sucked, because it would have been months and months and months until the next season started. But yeah, there is also the return of Mary Winchester at the last second in season 11, which that too shouldn't have not happened. And they, by that point, have fully realized that they're not bringing back the actor who played the father, so they're going to make the mother feel more important and bring her back, despite the fact that she died incredibly early in Dean's life, and Sam was a baby when she died, so he has no relationship to her at all. But they've consistently, over, I'd say about season 6 to season 11, tried to make Mary Winchester, the mother, more important of a character. And almost certainly that's the same concept that they were trying to do when they brought back the grandfather, Mary's father, and then basically did nothing with it as a character. One of the best things they did at season 11 is they introduced a new death, because the old actor, well, the old character got killed, but I'm sure the old actor probably wasn't guaranteed to come back either. Although it does also just kind of feel like they're still unwilling to have an ensemble cast, and they're shifting people around left and right, so you just don't have the same actors demanding bigger pay raises each season. But yeah, despite season 11 being much better than pretty much all of season 6 through season 10, and them bringing in the new death actor, to finish my thought, and having the new death, or at least one of the Grim Reapers, say, we have all agreed that if Sam and Dean die, they are going to stay dead, instead of taking their souls to heaven or hell, where they could be rescued by angels and return, which has happened before multiple times, far too many times. The Grim Reapers are going to toss their souls into what they call the Empty, which we see the Empty much later in later seasons, but at the moment they are just saying words, and those words will mean more. One thing about introducing Amara, and this was a huge mistake, is that they show her as just black smoke a lot. A lot of the way she attacks is black smoke. The problem with that is demons have canonically been black smoke for the entirety of the first 10 seasons. So Amara's black smoke fighting demon black smoke looks like the same thing, and it's confusing. And you see it in the final battle of season 11, in that you have one sequence where a bunch of demons show up, and I didn't even realize that the black smoke was supposed to be demons. And that was just a mistake, certainly, that they shouldn't have done. They shouldn't have done the whole black smoke thing for the demons, and they should have just had the demons be in human bodies attacking her. But it seems like perhaps the Amara actress was not comfortable or capable of doing any kind of hand-to-hand combat. But yeah, and that probably would have helped. They also show witches in season 11 as trying to be powerful, but really just for that final battle. The final battle with Amara is crazy in that they have to bring in Lucifer to try and defeat her, witches, demons, a whole collection of just everybody who's still in the show, who usually would be hating each other, working together, and still failing and killing God, nearly killing God. And it's really Dean that convinces Amara to save her brother and save the world at the same time. So it's all about family. Once again, it's all just give a speech and win. Don't actually do anything cool. They had made a whole bomb using souls. It's another great example of them not really caring about the fact that Amara was eating souls, or the fact that people have been just using souls and absorbing souls for a long time now. And you would think somebody would sit down and go, hey, wait, these human souls are probably precious and we shouldn't just be eating them and destroying them flippantly. Of course, same is true with like stabbing demons and killing the humans in them. They do make a single statement about that in one side episode, where they are just about to exorcise a demon out of a human body, and then they realize that the human body is already dead because it has a bullet hole in it, and they then just use the knife to stab them. Which, yeah, they definitely don't do that before. And then season Season 11 reveals Chuck to be God, capital G God, pretty flippantly, and really just because they needed some actor to be the God character, and if it wasn't going to be Chuck, I don't know who you would really introduce that would make any more sense. Of course, you could have God show up as Bobby or any other character that existed before. Could have showed up as their father. Could have showed up as their brother Adam. But yeah, pretty obviously, the way he is written, up until that point, Chuck was not supposed to, from the beginning, be gone. Like, that may have been in the mind of one executive producer, but it definitely wasn't being shared with people who were writing him in other ways. And even at this point, even though you have God nearly killed, and at the end of season 11 going away with his sister Amara, that really is just the beginning with Chuck as God, and he starts to play a very different role, and more of a role, in later seasons. You could have certainly just continued to have the absentee God concept too, and Amara could have been looking for God the entire season, and then fought with Lucifer and been defeated through that. You have slight mentions of the demon tablet. I think in season 11 they don't do anything with it. And you see, I think I got this to go away. Let's reload the page and see. Yeah, that's as much as I was able to fix. And then you have items that have been touched by God, like the Ark of the Covenant, which they're calling Hand of God items, which are these super powerful one-time use items. And still, even at that, Amara is not useful. In Season 11, you have Rowena the Witch, implied that she's going to make this mega coven, this new coven of witches, and she gets a coven together for about 2 minutes, and then they all get killed. So that's just another aspect of the story really not going anywhere. Although in that case, I think that was intentionally supposed to be a joke, that she was just never really going to get what she wants, since she is a bad guy character. You see Amara earlier on infect people with darkness, and it's just like this black vein that crawls through their head, neck, and body and infects them, which you could potentially have said that is just what happens when humans are near Amara, and you could just see Amara walking past people and them getting infected, and it not really being her fault so much. And then you could have Sam and Dean just misinterpret that as her attacking. Instead, they wrote it where very much she is rolling in fogs into cities and attacking. But yeah, they introduced the idea that heaven can smite people, but then it brings about the question as to why didn't they smite, say, Cassiel earlier, or Crowley earlier. And even then, when they do smite Amara, it doesn't work. It hurts her, but it doesn't hurt her enough. Inherently, when you make the Sister of God, then anything in reality should be weaker than that. They throw off reasons why they can't bring back the archangels and use them as fighters. But yeah, actually very little happens. So yeah, in the remake concept there, first of all, I would think the British Men of Letters arc of the next season is another arc that I think I'd mostly want to get rid of. I don't think season 12 is particularly that good, but maybe I'll be surprised pleasantly. But I would take a lot of the standalone episodes and I would replace earlier, worse versions of those standalone episodes. And I definitely would take the characterization of Sam and Dean being more mature at this point than the way they were in the first 10 seasons. I don't think there were that many silly episodes in season 10. There was one episode where it's mostly shot from the perspective of inside their car, but even that was a pretty serious episode. I don't think there was anything just silly. But yeah, the idea of potentially in the remake, up until this point in my mind, if I can even remember what I've said in the past, this is all a very pointless, silly way to rewatch Supernatural, but if you've seen it once, headcanoning a better version is a funny, entertaining thing for me to do, I guess. Yeah. The general idea would be, in the first season, you would have the Yellow Eyes Demon with Lucifer whispering and being this looming threat to the Yellow Eyes Demon, and you would start there. You would have a lot of monsters, episodes of the week, things that feel like they're episodes of the week in that first season, and demons themselves, probably you don't want to see too much of them at all until season 2. They did have an episode in season either 10 or 11 where they actually go to a Catholic church and they say that that's the first time they've been to confession and that they weren't Catholic, I would probably change that. I think it would give a lot more characterization to them if they did have that Catholic guilt, because they certainly are written like they have Catholic guilt. Plus, I kind of like the idea of them at least starting off with the idea that they are purifying their souls and keeping their souls pure while fighting these monsters, and that if they go into evil and corrupt their souls, they are going to become less effective at fighting the demons, as it were, because they never really touch on an idea like that in the series, except for maybe in the spell to close the gate. I would have Sam still at the first season using magic like crazy. I'd have them be more established. I would have them have something like the Men of Letters as a concept, but inherently, when they were given the bunker, they were implied to have been given a ton of information in this library, and it felt very much like the early seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where they were all meeting up in the library, but they don't really do anything with any of that information, so it's kind of pointless the way they built a set and they barely used it. But yeah, the Men of Letters bunker is really just designed to be a replacement for Bobby as a character, so they built a set to not have to have a character like Bobby and paid him, which that's a terrible production decision. But yeah, the idea of Amara is intriguing, but the truth of it is, as I start to sit here and think about it, if you wanted to remake Supernatural and do 5 seasons, unfortunately you have to leave her on the cutting room floor, because it's not a very relatable bad guy concept. The idea of a god has a sister who's more powerful than him just is not something that most people have headcanoned or thought about. It would be like in Star Wars if they just abruptly introduced that the Emperor had a sister who was more powerful than him. Like, you already have the established strongest character in Star Wars. It's the Emperor. And in Supernatural, it would be the Judeo-Christian God. So, yeah, unfortunately, she would be left on the cutting room floor if you're going to break 15 seasons down into 5 seasons. And instead, you would just have Lucifer come out of the cage, break out of the cage for some other reason, and then he would have been the bad guy, really. So yeah, for season 1, Yellow Eyes Demon would be the bad guy, get defeated. Season 2, Crowley be the bad guy and get defeated. Season 3, Lucifer escapes the cage, he's the bad guy and gets defeated, maybe doesn't fully get defeated. If you're going to stretch it out, you might have Lucifer escapes in season 3, and then there's a season for each of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That'd get you back up to 7 seasons, and that's too much, really, if you were trying to have a tight 5-season arc here. So, yeah, season 3, Lucifer. Season 5, probably God himself in a remake of Supernatural. That only leaves a season 4 middle bad guy to think about as far as how this remake would go. So yeah, we are back in line now. The show is more serious. I think the show by season 10 has also given up on trying to have backdoor pilots, so you're not going to just have a ton of new characters. That was another great thing about season 11. It's just there really were no new characters introduced. It was bringing back the favorites to get everybody on the same plan to defeat Amara. But you could certainly merge the concept of Amara and Leviathans, and maybe you could get some kind of monster there pretty easily. But then also you probably should merge in the concept of Lilith too. So yeah, there's several seasons of main bad guys that were just not used particularly well that could be merged into one really strong bad guy character. Yeah. If you had Amara be the sister of God, also the mother of all monsters, also the mother of Leviathans, with her escaping maybe purgatory, you release the Leviathans also, and then defeating Amara defeats the Leviathans, which is exactly how the Leviathans were defeated anyways, is that their one leader was defeated and then they basically were never mentioned again, even though theoretically they should still be running around with chickens with their heads cut off. But yeah, I think that would have all worked fairly well. Abaddon 2 could have been mixed in the mix. Yeah. Yeah. And probably for a remake of the 4th season, you probably would want Crowley back. So yeah, you have the bureaucrat Crowley in season 2, then him getting humiliated by Lucifer, and then him coming back as more of a angry, evil Crowley in season 4. Maybe. But actually, that's not what actually happens in the show. If it's anything, he becomes very much a joke character, particularly by season 10 and season 11. And yeah. I don't know if he really should be the big bad of a remake for season 4. And that's pretty much all I've done over the weekend. I did happen to come across that this thing I did a long time ago, before YouTube, before you could really, well, before I realized I could just make YouTube videos. I was in some Facebook groups on my personal Facebook account that were like movies, TV reviews, and groups like that. They never really went anywhere, and frankly, I think I probably overwhelmed them, and people lost interest, either because of me overwhelming them or just people lost interest in general. But yeah, frankly, the idea of a Facebook group where random people are just putting out their reviews doesn't fully make sense. It makes a little bit more sense in something like Discord nowadays, or Twitter. But yeah, that just shows how old it was. And so, back in my day, probably in the day in that I was actually watching Supernatural, originally, as it was coming out, I would have been watching a lot of TV shows, week to week, episodically. This would have been before Netflix or any streaming services, which really makes the concept not make as much sense these days. So I would watch like an episode of Stargate Atlantis, which Stargate Atlantis, for some crazy reason, is coming back onto TV years later, which I have to assume they are going to just kill off and replace actors like crazy, because, or it's just going to be like a mini series or a movie, because those actors have got to be incredibly old. Incredibly old. I saw one actress, she has like Graves' disease, or Graves' disease, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And yeah, she's the actress who plays Starlight in The Boys, and yeah, her appearance is pretty awful because of that. And yeah, that is a extreme exception of what's normally the case, but yeah, actors get older and cameras get better, so the idea of bringing back a group of actors, it's got to be like 15 years after Stargate Atlantis was canceled. Inherently, it also makes me wonder if the Sci-Fi Channel is just under new ownership or something, and they've realized that they cannot just continue to show movies and wrestling. It might also be that Sci-Fi Channel lost one of those wrestling contracts. That might be the case too, because there was a time there where wrestling was on the Sci-Fi Channel for some insane reason. Which anytime you have wrestling, that's 3 or 4 hours a week you're filling up. Anyways, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so I used to be part of this TV movie group, and mostly it would just be random movies I watched or TV episodes of the week. And so I had this system called Yay Boo, where if I like something, I would just type in the title and put Y for yay, like yay, or B for boo, like boo. Thumbs up, thumbs down type concept. And very often, that's all I would really say there. Like, because a weekly episode of Stargate Atlantis or any other TV show at the time really wouldn't have inspired much more commentary than that. Then I liked it, I didn't like it. On occasions, I definitely, if I had more to say, I would have like a sentence or something to say, hey, this doesn't make sense, or I didn't like this, or I didn't like that. And honestly, if I was doing a yay boo for per episode of Supernatural, it still would be very much just yay or boos. And frankly, I think even going any higher than that and trying to give it a 5 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 type review, or 1 out of 5 type review scale, is more work than most episodes are worth. We saw in the last stream how IMDb reviews are fairly different from what I would review episodes of Supernatural. Yeah, and inherently, I think a lot of the fans of Supernatural were liking it for its silliness, because they aren't particularly fans of actual sci-fi or horror elements. So obviously the silly episodes would be more popular to that audience, which is a much bigger audience, I'm sure, or at least it was at the time. So anyways, that got me thinking, as far as the A-Boo system, there probably is nowadays, as far as YouTube gaming content creators, a way to use that system. It is not episodic episodes of TV shows that you would yay boo, but if you were, say, mainlining, let's just pick Counter-Strike 2, and that is just your mainline game, and you're just playing that every week, a yay boo system might work. If you're just like doing live streams or a podcast or something like that, where you could say, hey, I'm still playing this game, I'm still having fun with this game, but we don't need to go into a 20-minute discussion about the game, or me trying to describe the game to you, or describe what is different about my experience this week, which isn't going to be that different from my experience last week. So yeah, it would be a small section in a bigger live stream podcast type presentation, and probably would only make sense if you had multiple people on the podcast, although that's not really necessary. Unfortunately, I don't think it works for me because I don't mainline anything and I don't jump into games and then jump out of them when I get bored. It definitely, a Yabu system is such a flippant system that it needs a flippant type of gamer to embrace it. Where, yeah, if you were having people only play games for 2 hours and then Yabuing it, that would make sense. And certainly the 2-hour mark is a lot of what mainstream video game journalists were only putting into games before making recommendations. And I guess if you're honest about it, it's not a completely wrong way to recommend games. In all fairness, if you're not having fun in 2 hours, then your opinion is going to very much be you're not going to have fun for the rest of the game. And as long as people know that that's how you play games and that's your opinions, and people can relate or like that opinion, then that's fine. Not everybody has to be a completionist. Although, frankly, I would say if you were really looking for consumer advice, you probably need to seek out more completionists than flippant players. But if you're a flippant player yourself, then maybe that concept works. So yeah, maybe there is a way that the Yabu system, which you might just go thumbs up or yes, no system, it doesn't matter what you call it and how you brand it, but just the quick positive or negative response might work for some content creators. I was in one group where it was TV and movies, and then I was in a sister group that was for video games. Typically in the video games, I was not doing a Yabu system at all. I was actually reviewing them, which definitely shows that I had a lot more to say about games even back then, which in fairness, video games give you a lot more time and a lot more interactions and things to comment on. Yeah, I'll go back to Supernatural for a brief second. They have like Rick and Morty in the background of one scene in season 11, and I'm like really surprised by that because I would not have thought Rick and Morty was on TV by the time Supernatural had ended, but yeah, there's a lot of overlap, way more than I thought. They mentioned Game of Thrones, Rick and Morty, Harry Potter. All those would have been WB properties anyway, so kind of makes sense that you would mention them. I suppose over the weekend I still was playing Pokemon TCG Pocket, trying to catch up. A lot of the people that I've randomly friended in Pokemon TCG Pocket, I'm recognizing, already have all the cards available. Which, even as a free-to-play player, I have almost all the cards available. But, yeah, it is somewhat surprising, and maybe speaks to the fact that only the early adopters are actually playing TCG Pocket, and they're not potentially getting a new audience or growing audience. I wouldn't expect that the new Pokemon game, which is not Pokemon Masters, would push people to play TCG Pocket. Still playing Memento Mori. Stuck. Can't really make as much progress as I would like to. But they have a 3.5-year anniversary event that's about to kick off. So there might be a little bit extra to do. Although their previous anniversary events have not been that huge of a thing. There is certainly something to be said about making it to 3.5 years as a gacha game, but there isn't a lot of examples of games going for very long times after that. Like 4 years tends to be just about the average length that even a successful gacha game goes. I don't follow Bank of Innovation, the developer, that much, so it may very well be that they don't have anything else in development. That being said, you never know. They may just, within the next 6 months to a year or two, announce a totally new game, at which point Memento Mori will not be the priority and may very well just be shut down, which that would kind of suck. One of the problems I have with games like Memento Mori and Destiny Child before then is that they give you a lot of story, and I just never really want to sit down and read the story. It's kind of the same problem I have with comic books, as I kind of want to own comic books, but then honestly I'm never really going to sit down and read them. Yeah, that's kind of a crazy thing to do, certainly. Didn't get back to playing any Resident Evil 2. It's now been easily another 3 weeks, so honestly, after beating the game the first time, it's been roughly 6 weeks at minimum in which I haven't played Resident Evil 2. And yeah, I'm also, while not getting this done, not also feeling a huge amount of pressure, and maybe I was putting too much pressure on myself previously, but I'm not feeling probably enough pressure now to get back to cleaning and decluttering as much as I should. Godot has a new development version for their next version of their game out, where they're throwing in new features and showing them off. Nothing hugely ground changing, but it's nice that of potential engines, open source engines, and game engines in general, Godot is the one that I hear about having new features that people are actually excited about. Whereas anytime I hear about the Unreal Engine or the Unity engine, usually it's just that those companies are doing something shady instead of adding new features. The Unreal Engine itself does more annually introduce new features to the game engine, there. But a lot of it is just at the Game Awards presentations, let's show off this technology, or when a quadruple A game comes out, let's show off this technology. Oh yeah. As I'm continuing to think about doing a movie night / anime night, I'm trying to think if there's like something like apples to apples as far as a card game, tabletop type game, to get to know people as far as their tastes in movies and such. Like, is there a way to do some sort of vetting here? Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I was looking at some of the scientific research on friendships, and the general idea from one study is that you need to do over 200 hours with a willing participant before you become a very good friend. And that does highlight an interesting thing as far as working with each other, not working in a job, but just doing shared activities, entertaining activities usually, before marrying somebody. Yeah. Because, yeah, you would think to be a very good friend you need 200 hours. I would assume you need 400 to 500 hours to become the very best friend. How many people, I wonder, actually have done anywhere close to 5 hours of shared activities with their significant other before getting married? I think there might be some very interesting, although kind of crazy, or at least people would call it crazy, marriage counseling there to say you're going to need to do 500 hours together before you could get married, or you should get married. Although, this is one of those things where churches charge so much anyways, that if a church gave you free use of their sanctuary, their air conditioner system, their electricity for a day, which might be $500 costing the church, depending on some weirdness there on how they're billed. If you did 500 hours and you got that much for free instead of paying thousands of dollars to rent out a church, that might be something a church could offer if they really wanted people to stay together. Although inherently, a lot of churches do give free uses of their sanctuary for members. And if you're a member of the church, you probably have already done 500 hours of activities within the church itself, and you will have a lot of religious pressure to stay married even if you're miserable. That being said, that doesn't really create a great situation. On a much smaller scale, there are some things you can pretty easily recommend to anybody before they get married. Have the couple move, have the couple assemble furniture, have the couple babysit. Dog sit first, maybe, then babysit, but definitely get to babysitting. Have the couple babysit a nearly newborn. Have the couple babysit a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old. Have them babysit a 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and have them babysit like a 14-year-old angsty teenager going through puberty, and a 17-year-old, 18-year-old person who kid that doesn't think they need to be babysat. They get a little bit of a taste of what kids are like throughout their entire childhood. Don't just have them babysit a perfect baby that will sleep throughout a 2-hour movie and the parents will come back and relieve you of your babysitting duty. But yeah, moving house, assembling furniture together, balance a checkbook is probably another good one. Discuss finances in general. Discuss life goals and what you want out of the future and what you're working to and what you're playing for. Things like that. Plenty of people get married without doing any of those things at all. And yeah, those are things and activities that in total would not go to 500 hours of activities. And inherently, if you are just trying to do 500 hours of shared activities, it's going to be 500 hours of fun in most cases. Which is fine if you're just trying to have friends and maybe make a meetup group or something like that. But marriage, 500 of shared activities are going to be 250 hours of good fun stuff and 250 hours of this really sucks stuff. So yeah, friendships don't have that in sickness and in health, for better and for worse, concept. Friendships pretty much go on pause or get ended the second there's any sickness or worse in the concept. Interesting, Binding of Isaac is back up at the top here for the Steam games. So yeah, I was thinking about that a little bit more. Yeah, in between bouts of long periods of sleeping and staying up way too late at night, which is still a big issue for me, and then not waking up early enough really, I've been thinking's the easiest thing to do. Obviously it's not particularly productive in any way, but yeah, inherently for the movie group, yeah, I'm still giving a lot of thought as far as just a Saturday evening, maybe 4-hour stretch. I think that's pretty good. So somewhere around like 5 or 6 in the evening, going to 10 or 11, 10 or 9 or 10 in the evening makes sense. That could be 2 movies with other side activities potentially. I don't know if 4 hours is enough for a Dungeons and Dragons group, but honestly, I'm not really. That is plan Z effectively. It's just like if I got really desperate trying to get people to show up, having a special Wednesday night Dungeons and Dragons type experience extra is something that I don't think I really want to do. But yeah, there's 2 hours on a Saturday and potentially 2 hours on Sunday seems to be a right amount, but that's really just 4 movies on a weekend. It's not a TV show of any sorts. But yeah. Inherently, I run into this problem where vetting also is a huge concern, because I mean you're gonna never get a perfect person, but a lot of times you're just gonna get awful people, just not on the same page, too political, too religious, too much there for the wrong reasons, or for something that's just not really compatible with what you're trying to create. Yeah. Alright, well, that is it for the warm-up section. Let's jump into the video game news section. We've got Video Games Chronicle articles to begin with. So it seems to me like the sponsored content is going to be a thing. So I need to probably close this. Potentially, I think maybe my new code is working around the sponsored content, because previously when they were having sponsored content, it was taking up the first spot and it was breaking my macros from running at all and opening any other news stories from Video Games Chronicles. Doesn't seem like that's the case this time, so at some point I must have done some coding to improve upon that. Oh, by the way, the UK is getting more censorious. The UK has always been more leaning towards the idea of censorship and being pro-censorship, but they're updating their laws to ban software that can make AI deepfakes, I think is one of the things they're trying to make a law against. And also they are banning in porn in general choking and strangulation play, which, yeah, I mean, they really are just banning entire fetishes at that point. Of course, I will fully say that choking and strangulation play is pretty dangerous, like in the real world with real humans. But I'm pretty sure these laws are also going to include anything that is imaginary, that is animated, that is faked in any way. But yeah, the number of women that I have heard that like choking and like it to be choked is actually shockingly high. And so yeah, there's definitely a case there that this is getting more censorious than is realistic or reasonable. Yeah, I feel like there is definitely a case in the UK with their censorship, particularly on how that's going to affect video games, because it may not just be in adult material that choking and strangulation is banned. It might very well be that video game characters choking each other out is going to be banned too. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in 007 First Light, for example. Also, Doki Doki Literature Club was banned from the Google Play Store, and there has been no change and no new news around that, despite the fact that Doki Doki Literature Club just has characters set in a school setting discussing violent things. It doesn't have any nudity or anything like that, which, yeah, it's a pretty extreme form of censorship that Google Play is doing here, for a game that is not brand new. And yeah, another 3D CGI game was banned from Steam. I'm getting all this news from Sex Positive Gaming, by the way, so I would definitely recommend checking their channel out and subscribing to them. But yeah, the censorship is still happening on Steam to some extent too. Oh yeah, and the new UK law also is, I think, going to ban any stepsister, stepbrother type porn, fiction stuff. So yeah, that is yet another hugely popular fandom and fetish in porn in general. Yeah. Alright. Yeah, I got distracted there. Indonesia's ratings board has leaked huge spoilers for 007 First Light and other unreleased games. We probably shouldn't go any further than that. I almost wonder if this might be an intentional way of trying to harm the industry overall instead of just incompetence. Like, we haven't really had an example that I can think of so far where you have ratings board demanding extra spoiler-like information and then them releasing it in the hopes that that would make the audience less interested in the game. I don't think that would work particularly well. I don't think spoilers for video games in particular are that big of an issue. Yeah, I can't even think of a example where spoilers would have really ruined it until you go back to like Final Fantasy VII and the character getting killed halfway through the game. In fairness, the newest Resident Evil game, I have gone out of my way to avoid being spoiled on it. Not because I think there's anything particularly surprising in the newest Resident Evil game. I've just gone out of my way to avoid being spoiled on most of the Resident Evil games I haven't played because I like a little bit of a surprise there. But it's not going to stop me from playing those games eventually. Yeah, I can't think of anything that just gets ruined in the video game form with spoilers, whereas a book or a movie that is more linear, having spoilers in it probably hurts its sellability a lot more. But even then, it would almost have to be a movie or a TV show, something fairly short, where the spoiler is such a big part of the whole. But yeah, a 200-hour game with one spoiler is not going to change my experience too much. Yeah. Let's see. Metro 2039 will be revealed this week. 4A Game confirms the next installment in the first-person shooter franchise will debut via an Xbox showcase on Thursday. Okay, so that's an announcement for an announcement. A hacker group confirms it will release stolen Rockstar Games data. The GTA 6 developer confirmed a breach this weekend, but downplayed its impact. The hacker group Shiny Hunters is demanding a ransom for their data. Again, if they release the data, it's probably not going to be a full playable version of the game that gets released. It's going to be data that could be full of spoilers. But particularly in the case of GTA 6, what is the spoiler really going to do or change anything? I don't think it would matter that much. And certainly there is a second to think about. If you are a YouTube content creator, would you want to touch this stolen data if you could get your hands on it, and crawl through it and make footage and content based on it? If you're a leak type content creator who just covers leaks all over the place, you would already be doing a lot of that. But if you're not someone who really covers leaks, I would inherently encourage people to go down that route, because it's just kind of pointless. Unfortunately, it may be the case that leak content creators get a lot more views. Oh, by the way, I changed a bunch of my settings. I don't know if any of it improved anything on this live stream, so if anybody new is here, hi. Yeah, I'm trying to see if messing with the tags, reducing the number of tags, does anything. I don't think it really does. And if going back to the gaming category instead of the news and politics category would get me any more views. I'm not sure if it will or not. Inherently, I'm also wondering if maybe I just need to change everything always. Just jump around a lot more. Do a lot more experimenting. Because one of the things about the YouTube algorithm is you just never know what that audience is going to be that the algorithm picks to promote your game or your video to first. And as a small content creator, it basically could be any random audience at all, and it is just luck on that aspect. Whereas a big content creator, the algorithm knows their audience. They have thousands of people, millions of subscribers that will watch whatever they create and put out, and that will be their initial audience to give their videos enough success to go forward to the next step. Whereas a content creator who has, say, 1,000 subscribers, and maybe 100 of them are getting the option to watch your videos, and then maybe another 100 people at random are given the option to watch your videos, that's not really going to be that many people that actually click and hit play. I don't know why we have Ground Zero here open. It's not out yet. It might be something interesting, but it does come out. I don't know anything about Last Flag. It's an online PvP game. Let's see. Hideo Kojima casting call reveals Physint hijacked bus scene and Mads Mikkelsen type villain. Physint capture work will reportedly begin this summer. I don't know what Physint is. I would assume it's some kind of 3D scanning motion capture. It is very much Hideo Kojima's desire to be an old school movie creator, that he's looking for an antagonistic character with a German accent. It does also say Mads Mikkelsen in Hannibal but with flair, which makes me think Mads Mikkelsen's character was either killed off completely in the first game or they're just not working with him in this next game. Pheasant seems to be a name of a game. Yeah, it's a brand new original IP, next generation action espionage game. Okay, well, I question whether this is really newsworthy news, but it's probably also just a slow Monday, a slow weekend. But yeah, casting calls for characters for games that won't be out for years is barely news. And I'd much rather see people just talk about new games, random new games on Steam, than casting calls. This is where the Yay Boo system might actually work as far as my content creation, but it still doesn't really work, because if I was going to make like YouTube shorts, and that's where I think the Yay Boo particularly would work as a concept, is that if you just have people spending 3 minutes to go through all the games, or 3 minutes or less to go Yay Boo on all the games you're playing, or if I was to in 3 minutes or less go Yay Boo to all the games that came out on Steam in a certain day, that would be interesting, but that would take way more work than it seems like it would. And I couldn't actually show off all the games in 3 minutes that come out, even in one day on Steam. There's too many of them. And I don't see a real reason why you would want to show off the bad games, the boos, at all. Our next Video Games Chronicle article says Fable's release has reportedly been pushed back over GTA concerns. The Playground Games reboot could now release later, it's claimed. Wasn't there also a case, though, that some of the team that was working on Fable had been laid off from Microsoft? This is coming from Giant Bomb journalist Jeff Grubb. I don't feel like Jeff Grubb is a good source at all for journalism. Maybe he's changed his ways in the year or two since I last watched him, but he was incredibly flippant about getting things right last time I saw him. Just like, even when corrected by his peers in a Giant Bombcast podcast, he was just like, yeah, well, whatever. When he's supposed to be a journalist and supposed to get facts right, I think he also is very, very willing to report on / possibly even make up leaks without any real vetting or concern. Unlike other leakers, he doesn't seem to have any real high consistency of accuracy. But yeah, on the face of it, which is, I mean, all you really can do with a rumor is it believable? Sure. Are most rumors believable? Yeah, because people wouldn't repeat rumors that are completely unbelievable. But a rumor that any random game is getting delayed is so generic and so normalized in the game industry that it is again questionable whether this is actually any news at all. I mean, it really isn't news. It's reporting on a rumor, which means nothing to anybody. But yeah, in my ideal world, I don't know how you would get the gaming audience to get on board with this. I would prefer if gamers in general just boycotted this kind of rumor news in favor of actually looking at games that actually came out. Unfortunately, there's so much noise from the rumor news in mainstream video game journalism that what most gamers do is not look at any of the news at all, only listen to their one friend who maybe watches some news that's usually biased in some way, and then they just play the games that their friends are playing. Which I guess that works for them pretty well and saves them a decent amount of time. It doesn't help the game industry as much as I would like it to, though, because you definitely don't see smaller and medium-sized games getting a fair chance when a significant amount of the gaming community is just playing the big games that their friends are playing. But yeah, we haven't seen Marathon. I assume Marathon is just gonna evaporate away and people are gonna stop talking about it. Moving on, Pete Hines says he quit Bethesda post Xbox because it's part of something not genuine. Former publishing boss suggests he was frustrated about the direction of the Elder Scrolls publisher. Okay. Yeah, well, I can't help but think that probably will be better for Pete Hines and probably for Bethesda if Bethesda needs to exist at all. Inherently, I would have to assume that part of the reason why ZeniMax was acquired by Microsoft and ZeniMax sold itself to Microsoft is because they wanted somebody to pay their bills so they could take forever to develop their next game. But it's also not particularly uncommon for people to quit after a game is released. Starfield was released, it was garbage. But what Bethesda game that is, yeah, what Bethesda game isn't garbage though? I mean, well, let's just be honest here. Skyrim, in its initial versions, garbage. It only became great with mods and a lot of work and a lot of polish on it. And garbage was just a lot more acceptable back when Skyrim came out. Fallout 4, it's a fine game, but it's still kind of garbagey. It's nowhere as exciting as the Fallout London mod. And Starfield, by far the most garbage game in recent history, just because it doesn't have anything. I guess genuine is a good word to use. Doesn't really have an idea or a concept there that had any enthusiasm behind it, it feels like. I've long since pushed the idea that the ZeniMax management in particular should have been laid off long ago, and that Microsoft should have a direct control of Bethesda and really force them to put things out either quicker, which, yeah, that really is the only direction to go, is to just pull them back and say, hey, you're going to put out more games more often, and maybe they'll be buggy, but at least you'll be consistently releasing something instead of taking forever and still releasing buggy games. I would definitely push to get rid of the Gamebryo engine too and make them learn a whole new engine. Maybe with that you could buy them some more time to start over projects using Unreal Engine instead. I definitely would push Todd Howard to be a figurehead and take him out of any decision-making positions, because obviously he is one of the linchpin problems of Bethesda. But Pete Hines may have also been a problem, so I don't know the history well enough to know if he got out because good reasons or bad reasons, or if him getting out is a good thing or a bad thing, which is, I guess, the bigger question. But yeah, veterans in general at Bethesda are probably already designed and just solidified into a slow way of doing things. And I would potentially just take Bethesda's IP and hand it to whole new teams that are more hungry, more thirsty to see a game actually get released and put the veterans out to pasture. I think that's enough to say about that. Then this is the other story. I guess Rockstar has confirmed a new data breach after the hacker team threatens pay or releak. The GTA developer claims that a limited amount of non-material company information was accessed. Okay. Shiny hunters have previously targeted Microsoft, Cisco, AT&T, and Ticketmaster. All of these companies share one thing in that they are all huge companies that are very greedy and very expensive companies. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that Shiny Hunters is state-sponsored hackers of some sort. I wouldn't be surprised if we found out all hacker groups are sponsored or supported by governments in some sort. I know that there were Iranian-based products that controlled circuit breakers in the United States that had backdoors and were getting hacked, or they had vulnerabilities and were getting hacked. So, yeah, those kinds of things are happening fairly often these days, and companies often don't even come public with it to say that they've been hacked. Yeah. And I guess in a funny way, there is this cyberpunk future where hacking giant corporations and demanding ransoms from them might just be the new era of piracy, and the new era in which anybody who is not working for a giant corporation can get any kind of money. Yeah. As more, I guess, legitimate jobs dry up, it is a case that people turn to crime, and crime on computers, hacking, is perhaps some of the safest and easiest crimes to commit. If you have know-how. If you don't have the know-how, then you go into selling drugs or robbing people, things like that. Alright, well, that's going to bring us to the Gematsu articles now. We didn't have too many in there. The Indie Live Expo, April 25th, 2026, is going to feature over 200 games, including .45 Parabellum Bloodhound. Interesting. Interesting art style in the characters for these mascots. Generally, you see mascots are much more in that bright, colorful anime style, and they're emphasizing the orange color palette a lot in these characters. And I guess perhaps there's something that's supposed to be hinted at here, but I'm not sure exactly what. It has elements that feel robotic, but then it also has elements that feel magical, so it's almost like half magic, half robots. But yeah, I'm not really able to take too much from these mascots. And generally, I would think you would want one mascot character. if those are characters from a specific game, I don't recognize it. Let's watch this trailer and see what it shows us. So one of the things we'll almost certainly see from indie games that are getting in a big expo is that they will have that AA feel to them, and perhaps that is the best. See, now that's the kind of mascot character that I would have assumed they would have had. But yeah, it'll have just a little bit more visual polish to it. It'll just be slightly bigger games than the purest of single developer indie games have. But even in this, you can see that they only really showed off footage for 2 games, and then they showed off a lot of smaller screens for all the other games. I would assume this is taking place in more of an Asian country because of the Japanese, Korean, and Chinese languages being supported. So 1,100 submissions were received, only 200 are being shown. That shows you something certainly too, that only 1 out of every 5 games roughly were actually approved. But yeah, in fairness, if you were to take 1 out of every 5 games that bothered to actually even submit, you're going to get a very high cream of the crop presentation, certainly. But yeah, this is the kind of expo that probably in live streams should be watched more often. Having given a lot of thought to the idea of going back and sitting through and watching more of these streams and presentations and doing reactions to them, I probably should just do everything, every cliched trick that content creators do, and just sit through it and do a reaction to it. But you know, I'm not really in the mood to sit through large presentations like this and have very little to say. Moving on, Death End Request Code Z for Switch is coming to Asia in English in 2026. This may have been one of those games that was censored or just not allowed in the West. Seems like there's a version of it in on Steam, but I don't even want to risk pushing the player in fear of there being adult content, but I guess not. It looks like it is a dungeon crawler, though. Actually, it's not that interesting. I don't know if there's a Death End series. If this is the only game. It's from Idea Factory, who's kind of notorious for making dungeon crawler games. They make too many at this point. We still never really got a general description as far as whether mature content description should really just be sexual content, or if it should include swearing. Yeah. Probably would help if there were more checkboxes to check off when filling out those descriptions, instead of it just being an empty text box, I assume, for publishers and developers to describe their games completely differently from game to game. A horror comedy series anthology, The Killer, Anthology of the Killer, is coming to the PS5, Switch on April 14th. It's already on PC. Is this one I overlooked? Yeah. Apparently it is. I can see visually why I would have overlooked it. This marker style does not always really appeal to me. Metro 2039 is going to be announced on April 16th. I assume that this is just a 15-second video of the date filling in. And yeah, boy does that feel very Pip-Boy like as far as a device. Windrose is not out yet. That's the pirate game. ZPF is not out yet. I don't know why we have so many games opening up that don't seem to be related to any articles. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai, the Hinokami Chronicles 2 DLC character Shinobu Kocho Infinity Castle launches April 17th. So this series is clearly fairly popular still. But it is probably a great example of how something can be very positively reviewed, very popular, and really not have any presence in the Western world outside of fans of the Demon Slayer anime, at least. Yeah. This is... I'm not even sure if this is actually a fighting game. It says 3D fighting game. Yeah, there it is. I have to find the tag. Yeah, this is kind of a great example of a very flashy, high action, anime based video game that would be the absolute wrong game to try to introduce people into anime or anime video games in particular. You don't really have a Studio Ghibli. Not that even Studio Ghibli anime movies are a great way to transition people to regular anime, non-Ghibli anime. Yeah. Whether it's anime video games or just anime movies or manga or anything, it often feels like the only way to get people on board is a trial by fire and giving them something fairly extreme. Because even if you did something that is more of a his and her circumstances, romance, or fruit baskets, it's probably a more modern one to make a reference to. I mean, that's just going to be very, very different from something like Akira. So, I mean, the genre jumping there is just huge at that point. In video games, there's going to be even less of that. So, yeah. Suppose what you would recommend is Dragon Ball, since that's pretty well known as far as fighting games based off of an anime series. Or the soccer game might make some sense too. Yeah, you can see that recommendation here. It's not particularly too accurate. Not Shinobi Strikers, that's not the one I was thinking of. I was thinking of Inazuma 11. Yeah, particularly for a fighting game, just going with the Dragon Ball and the Bleach and all of those fighting animes, which are their own little subgenre, probably is the right way to go about it. Yeah, it's more for movies. I'm trying to get people to jump through genres, because there's just a ton more TV and movies in the anime style than there are video games based off animes. Yeah. Let's see, this week's Japanese game releases: Pragmata, Tomodachi Life, Living the Dream, and more. This might be why all of those games were open up until this point. I am surprised that Pragmata is just coming out so early. I have just been assuming that they were going to at some point put out a very different trailer that showed us a very different aspect to that game, but I guess that doesn't exist at all. A lot of digital games coming out at this time. Yeah. Yeah, I almost wonder if, like, how hard it would be to make custom playing cards with my movie collection on it. Probably would be a ton of work, really, particularly if you're going to try and get nice art on it and not just the name of the show or something like that. But yeah, there's... Yeah, I was trying to see if there was like a movie apples to apples type game out there, and while there is a Marvel apples to apples and a Disney apples to apples game. But yeah, I was looking in particular for games like apples to apples also on a side note to try and figure out, are there games that are like getting to know your games? And most of them are just like text-based, and you can add some non-speech text-based to them, but I mean, it's never have I ever, two truths and a lie, things like that, which I don't know how you elevate that and encourage that type of game. And frankly, I think two truths and lies and never have I ever, and things like that, perhaps are a little bit more privacy invading than you really need for a movie group. It heavily depends on, do you really want to get to know these people, or do you just really want to know their fandom? And for a movie group in particular, or a video game group, or whatever kind of group that's based off of a fandom, the fandom is what you really want to know. You kind of don't want to force newbies, people who have been there for the first time, into exposing too much of their personal life. And that's what, particularly where, like, never have I ever starts to fall apart, is that you are encouraging people to ask questions that are probing, that aren't being offered up as answers. Moving on, I'm all over the place still. Arknight's Infield version 1.2 update at the Wake of Spring launches April 17th. Another update for a mobile game. Yeah, ton of different language trailers. Cave Story for PC major update is now available. It adds a 2-player mode, mod support, enhanced visuals, and more. Okay. I remember the name of Cave Story, but I definitely don't remember what the game actually plays like or is. Yep. Slow weekend, as it tends to be, so we're already to the Gaming on Linux articles. Dome Keeper's free multiplayer update and Lost Keeper's DLC have launched. Check those out if you're interested. You can see Dome Keeper is very positive. So it's not a game I think I'd be super in the mood to play right now. Of course, I'm not really in the mood to play much of anything right now. Let's see. Portal 2 Community Edition arrives in beta on April 17th. The Portal 2 modding scene is about to explode with the upcoming beta release of the Portal 2 Community Edition, giving you some big new tools what could end up being the best way to play through or create any Portal 2 content. Since it's an open beta, the developer says to expect beta bugs and other issues, but no special keys required to access it. You just need to download it from Steam if you own the original Portal 2 from Valve. Is this actually from Valve? I think it is. Let's see. Features previously thought to be impossible in Portal 2 due to architectural limitations of the source engine are now possible thanks to a wide array of improvements introduced in Strata source, an officially licensed, heavily modified version of the Counter-Strike Global Offensive engine branch. So it's going to have a whole bunch of physics type things you couldn't have done before. Now, it doesn't really seem like it would have to be officially licensed if it was from Valve themselves. So yeah, let's see what the trailer shows us. Is very possibly is going to be just above my head technical stuff, or maybe not above my head, but technical stuff that doesn't really tell us too much. So far, all they really have been showing us is visual updates. A campaign system, bigger areas overall, a whole different script support. Yeah. I've played a couple of mods to Portal 2, and what those couple of mods that I have played have instilled in me is the desire for more story, way more than a desire for a few more puzzles. And usually in those mods they introduce one major concept into the puzzles that is not in Portal 2. One of the mods, you are going back in time, and so you go through a portal and there's a destroyed version of a room and a non-destroyed version of the room. You have to go back and forth. In another one, you are set in a completely different location and an earlier time than the events of Portal 2, which allows for slightly different variety in what you're seeing and doing. But yeah, if there was a really great gameplay mechanic to be put in the Portal universe, then they would put it in the Portal universe and make a Portal 3, I think, at this point. That being said, it very possibly would be, if they found a great gameplay mechanic, that they would just put it into the next Half-Life game, spin-off game. And it's a mean thing to say, certainly, but it might very well be at this point that they should just wait until Gabe Newell passes away and then put out something called Half-Life 3 that is just the funeral service for Gabe Newell, or the grave of Gabe Newell. And then you could say, well, that's Half-Life 3, and that's the end of that. You really don't have to wait for a funeral or someone to die to do that too. They should really just shove something out and call it Half-Life 3. It just doesn't matter at this point. Get past the 3. Start to think about full-on reboots. Start to think about a 4. But yeah, the not being able to count to 3 joke is hindering Valve a lot. But honestly, the bigger problem is just how Valve is run, and them just not churning out as many games as they should have for a very long time. And for a brief time there, it felt like they were going to start to put out more games. But, I mean, they kind of failed at that too. Like, Artifact, I think, came out, but it wasn't a huge success. Deadlock is still in development, but they really aren't making a ton of new games. Not anywhere as many as you'd like them to see. I'd like to see them on a 4-year cycle at the minimum of guaranteed every 4 years there's going to be a new game from Valve. And I don't think we're even to that point. See, the thing about this mod, though, is I could add it to my library, but what would I do with it? Yeah, I don't even think we're getting the idea that if you install this mod, you're going to be able to play the original Portal 2 games with better graphics. Which, that would be the first thing I would like to see on something like this, is that you would have more volumetric, more ray tracing like lighting while playing Portal 2. Although it might very well not even be that recognizable that anything has changed. It's been so long since Portal 2 has come out, and Portal 2 looked like a very lovely game when it did come out, that visually a visual improvement would only be noticeable if you could toggle the effects on and off. This is one of those examples of where modding, I think, can be a real problem, in that if you're pushing people who have the potential, have the beginnings of the skill to be game developers themselves, into being modders instead, they're going to pigeonhole themselves into using the wrong software, which in this case would be this modding tool, instead of making their own games. And by far, I would rather see somebody develop their own game inspired by what they like about Portal in a engine like Godot, or even Unreal or Unity, which would then let them learn how to make games on a more standard engine, which would let them go and make other things with that same standard engine. Whereas if you learn to make mods using this modding tool, you're learning nothing as far as how to make other kinds of games. It is effectively the RPG Maker argument in a nutshell, is that if you learn to make games in RPG Maker, you will only be able to make games in RPG Maker. But yeah, I was watching a YouTube video of somebody who broke out of making games on RPG Maker, and they went to Godot, and they were like, yeah, they could not make their game in RPG Maker. It was too limited. It wasn't a powerful enough game engine, and so they moved to Godot, and they are loving it quite a bit. Yeah, this trailer here is just really showing visuals. Showing visuals while not really showing the main game. And even from a non-programming perspective, even from a gamer's consumption perspective, do we really need games to just be that pretty? Are we really... Why is a great question to ask, I suppose. Why is it always that we are pushed or we are encouraged to want games to look really, really pretty, when we know that that just means that the game's hardware is going to have to go up, and you're going to have to buy more CPU, more GPU to get the prettiness, and the amount of prettiness you get is questionable. I question that same idea also with things like Blu-ray 4Ks. There was a slick deal sales for the movie What Dreams May Come for Blu-ray for $8, but then I believe Shout Street, which I guess is not Shout Factory, is coming out with a 4K version of What Dreams May Come in just a matter of weeks. So they're clearing off the Blu-rays to, I guess, compete against the 4Ks. But What Dreams May Come has a lot of dark sequences, and any movie with dark sequences, I generally want to try and get the 4Ks. That being said, I also realized that I had bought yet another movie that I had already had. So I have like 2 Blu-rays of The Secret of Yeti from Ghibli, different versions, so there might be something different there, but yeah, I made a mistake there. My collection and my log here is pretty bad as far as knowing what I have and what I don't. As a project I would like to start if I could ever stop, finish other projects, certainly. But yeah, the question definitely does occur to me, though, whether a lot of these Blu-rays are any better than the DVDs of certain movies, depending on whether it was a film print or whether it was just a digital print, or whether they're just upscaling the DVDs to Blu-ray. And then it is even more questionable whether a Blu-ray print is any different than the 4K prints. We would hope the 4Ks are better prints, but you never know. It depends on who works on it and how good of a job they have and what source material as far as the masters are and what state the masters are. If it's film, the film might be damaged by the time they make a 4K. Or it just might be that the film is scanned poorly for the 4K. We haven't had a lot of examples of that, but yeah, I'd be particularly cautious around TV shows being put on 4K, or movies that would have taken multiple discs getting squeezed down to one Blu-ray, because I have heard that where they are squishing what used to be 2 or 3 disc miniseries movies into one Blu-ray versus what would have been 3, and then the compression ratio is higher, and it's even worse than the previous versions. Although I think the vast majority of the cases, when you get a 4K plus Blu-ray disc, if those are separate discs, the plus Blu-ray is just been removed from one packaging of the Blu-ray alone and put in the 4K packaging. Moving on, I'm getting distracted again. Amazon Luna has ripped out game stores, game purchases, and third-party subscriptions. As of April 10th, they're doubling down on their own direct features and built-in services, rather than partnering with anyone else for moving purchases, extra subscriptions, and third-party stores. Which you could almost see Amazon Luna selling that as a good thing, but they didn't bother to really advertise it or sell it at all, and I think most people would take it as Amazon Luna is not going to be around for much longer, if I was to guess. The III Initiative Showcase had some really incredible announcements. Here's a roundup. So the III Initiative already happened? Interesting. So we had just heard about it from Video Games Chronicle, but apparently the showcase happened really quickly after that. There is a long list here on Gaming on Linux of games. Maybe there are two different events. It's very possible that there are just two different indie events. Because yeah, this is more Western games. And the other event that we saw Video Games Chronicle announce was more Eastern games. These are all games that we had seen before. We may end up looking at all their Steam pages. The Lift, Thick as Thieves, Too Deep to Quit, all caught my attention. Windrose caught my attention. Also, Dune Awakening is going to get self-hosted servers, plus they're splitting player versus event versus and PvP. Interesting. I wonder if that's going to make the player base happy and the fan base happy or unhappy. In the last 30 days, it's been 68% positive, whereas it's 71% positive overall, so not doing particularly great. Decent numbers, 24-hour peak of 11,000 players for what is, I think, a mostly online co-op game. I think there is also an element around Dune Awakening that they have not put out the full Doom story that they committed to, which I know there is a ton of Doom stories. They probably could never commit to telling all of the sequels of the Dune series. I always still look at Dune fans as being a little weird, side-eyeing them. And if I'm saying that, that probably is saying something pretty extreme, and that I just feel like there's way too much hard sci-fi in Dune, and people who are fans of that become way too much of a fan of it. I guess in general just don't get it, and maybe the people that read the books would be getting that entertainment value that I'm missing. I would assume that is the case, and that there has been only a medium amount of success of converting the Dune stories to TV and movies and video games. But yeah, it may also just be a time thing that this current generation of big fans are into Dune, whereas perhaps the previous generation was into Lord of the Rings. Yeah. I don't know what books people would be into these days. Percy Jackson would be, I guess, the most recent book series that I imagine you'd have a pretty big fandom. Harry Potter, obviously. Seems like you like Game of Thrones and things like that. And Knight of Seven Kingdoms are getting pushed and promoted, but I don't know if they're really popular. Let's see, the Absolute Classic Cave Story Plus has a huge free upgrade. Is it a Metroidvania game? It's a huge list here. There's got to be a better way to display a list like that. At least get rid of the double spacing in that case. Okay, so here's Cave Story. Very positive. It is a Metroidvania game. Yeah, perhaps for a 15-year-old game, the graphics are a little rough, but not terrible. It certainly is hitting harder these days, too, that you have games that are 15 years old, and I still haven't gotten around to playing them. And Angry Video Game Nerd, for instance, on YouTube, is at his 20th year anniversary, too. It's just, yeah. Time passes whether you want it to or not, and the amount you can accomplish, or I can accomplish personally, is never high enough, never close to high enough. Suppose this gives you some slight relevancy to go back and play this, or for me to play it the first time. But I probably wouldn't get around to doing that. The open source real-time strategy game Warzone 2100 version 4.7 brings major changes. Okay, I will leave it at that. And then D7VK version 1.7 brings even more retro direct 3D gaming to Linux. D7VK is a Vulkan-based translation layer for DirectX 7, 3, 5, and 6. Was there ever a DirectX 4? They say it's for DK7 VK3, 5, 6, 7. It will run with... Yeah, I bet there wasn't a DirectX 4. I bet it was DirectX 3 for Windows 3.1, and then it jumped to Windows 95 and DirectX 5. That does so severely imply that you're going to have pretty old games getting more support. But I do have to say, certainly, it's also worth pointing out that I don't think you're going to get people to leave Windows and move to Linux because they can play a Windows 95 game or Windows 3.1. It's nice the features there, and certainly the enthusiasts will be happy about that, but let's just be realistic here. The reason why people will move to from Windows to Linux is because Windows sucks and they want to play their more recent games. But we are obviously attacking it. By we I don't mean me, I mean programmers are obviously attacking the issue from every single angle to reach the nearly impossible goal of getting every single game to run nicely on Linux. And frankly, if they ever did reach that goal, that means pretty much every old game would run on Linux forever. Although Linux kernel 7.0 is potentially discussing the idea of dropping the 486 CPU chipset support. Although I don't think that really matters too much. Like, just because you're not supporting the actual hardware, that doesn't mean that the software won't work. It'll just be through more translation layers like this. And we probably would be 2 or 3 decades away from the point where somebody would say, let's actually optimize and get rid of some of these translation layers because they're old and not relevant. I just don't think that would ever really kick in. Nobody in the Linux community wants to write code that loses feature or loses support unless they can really make an argument that nobody is using it for games. I don't think you're ever going to make that argument. Linux kernel 7.0 is out now for a couple of distros to have built on it already. But now they move on to Windows kernel 7.1. So 7.0 works towards upcoming AMD GPUs, AMD GPU fixes for older Radeon GPUs, improved NTFS, that's new technology file system support, that's Windows 2000 files format, which I guess technically they still are using NTFS at this point. Improved Intel Nova Lake support, that's one of the newest chipsets from Intel. XFS file system gained self-healing features. This is, I assume, the exFAT file system, but it might be something else. The ext4 file system saw improved write performance for concurrent direct I/O writes. That is typically what people use, is ext4 if they're afraid to not use something like ZFS, which is more platform agnostic and Unix based, and not really compatible with the kernel itself license. Or they would use ButterFS or BetterFS, whichever way you want to call it. They've added support for Rock Band 4, PS4, and PS5 guitars. That's interesting. I still do have in the back of my head a thought there, and I guess maybe it would make some sense to see if I could get a Rock Band PlayStation guitar. But even if I did get that, the number of software that I've found on Steam that would actually play with it seems to be fairly low. So now it really would be a party trick, certainly, type thing. Spending a lot of money for a Rock Band guitar when I personally would never use it. But yeah, it's kind of the same idea of getting a karaoke machine. It's just, these are gimmicks bars do to try to bring people in, and they work only minimally. And then apparently expanded support for keyboard AI keys, which I don't know what those are, but I guess that's something you can do. So yeah, even in that quick highlights, that's not particularly a huge amount of changes. The biggest thing about the kernel 7.0 is Rust is here to stay, and there is a push outside of the gaming developers community in particular to rewrite a lot of stuff in Rust and just have, if not more efficient code, more secure code. And that may be the name of the game for developing going forward, is just make secure code and give up on pretending like you're making efficient code, because let's face it, it's been decades since developers have really tried to make more efficient code. And then the Heroes of Might and Magic 2 Project F Heroes 2 version 1.1.15 is out now. It's interesting, certainly, that while we're seeing the open source way to play Heroes of Might and Magic 2, Heroes of Might and Magic 3 is doing a cross promotion with another game, and Heroes' newest game is just about to come out. So there's a weird counter synergy, I'd almost describe it, in that there's too much Might and Magic, Heroes of Might and Magic happening at once, considering how incredibly long missions of these games are. And I guess inherently I can't play Heroes of Might and Magic game until I finish the Red Alert games, because those are very similar in the amount of time they take to play. Alright, they're bringing us to GameDeveloper.com, but it doesn't look like I have any GameDeveloper.com articles. I have a link here for Kingdom Rush Origins, which is some kind of tower defense game in 2018, which I think I can skip. And then we have Legion TD2, which is another tower defense game. And then we have Tower Escape, which is yet another tower defense game. Interesting. Although that one looks a little different, and I guess that's why it's on my wish list. Alright, so then that's going to bring us to all the new games on Steam, and let's just see if we can burn through this and be done. Same old rules as we look at every new game that comes out on Steam until I make some changes here. If I swipe down like this, it means I'm not really interested in it and don't want to make a YouTube short on it. Seems like there's a whole bunch of Warhammer Classic games. Was that a Warhammer Classic game we just closed? Yeah, these are all Warhammer Classic games except for this one. guess we'll follow these instead. I think inherently I just don't know what Warhammer is. Yeah, Warhammer 40k or Warhammer in general. And I think from a video game perspective, in particular, it's hard to be a Warhammer fan. I think you have to be more of a fan of the tabletop games. Right. So the move here is I'm looking for something with AI in it. This one doesn't look like it would have AI in it. This one has in-app purchases for some reason. And I'm looking for something that doesn't support English. I'm going to try and get back to programming and have those kinds of tabs automatically close and have more of a curated experience. We've had already been forced into a curated experience. Now when I want to make a YouTube short, I'm going to swipe this way to leave the tabs open. But yeah, we've had a curated experience up until this point exclusively because of the adult content in YouTube. Just not wanting me to even discuss adult content, let alone even show the names of them. So we are just pushing it further into, here's a curation of games that I'm then going to further take an ice pick to and curate even more into things that I potentially would make YouTube shorts on. This is one of those games where I'll give it a chance, but it's very possibly just too bright. The sharp contrast of bright and darkness doesn't always work. Visually, for me at least. I'm gonna give this a chance. Probably being very generous. Not interested in a clicky game. Give this a chance. No, I think no to that. Yeah, I'm not expecting too much as far as major AAA games coming out. I'm gonna put this on the wish list, even though it's very possibly not my style of game. But yeah, I'm running out of things to say. Yeah, what am I gonna do for the rest of today? That is a intriguing question. Generally, the answer is just about nothing. Nope, this is already mixed. We don't need to worry about that. But yeah, the Oceaneers game there might be something in the future. Wait for more reviews. But yeah, every time I stream Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that is most of the day done for me. And honestly, I'm kind of getting a feeling that in the next month or so, I'm particularly not going to be accomplishing anywhere as much stuff anyway, so I might just get back to playing games. Like, I really wanted to get a lot of stuff accomplished and just be done with them this early first quarter of the year, but I think I may have overexhausted myself and just run out of opportunities and run out of energy. It's really not a situation where I should give up on it, but yeah. I could see at the very least maybe taking an entire month off, just making footage, playing video games, hopefully getting back to scheduling footage. Of course, if I took a month off and actually built my new computer, that would be great. That'd be a great excuse to say, hey, I'm just going to focus on this one project. Yeah. Wait, that's probably AI. Yeah. So here's an AI one we can work on. Now we're just looking for one that doesn't have English as a language. If I could find the phrase desktop pet, maybe I should close those too. Because like desktop games just aren't gonna matter to me ever. I don't want to go super deep into the idea of just blanket ignoring games. But yeah, I could blanket ignore Backrooms games if there was enough of them to justify doing that. Yeah. Might be something here. Probably not. I'm still pretty peeved in the fact that Raspberry Pis are way too expensive and there's no more projects to be done with them. I'm also fairly peeved that there hasn't been a great improvement on other replacements like the ESP32 chipsets to do great things with them. Like, there is still a pretty large gap between what you could do as far as a single function device with an ESP32 and a full computer setup with running Linux on a Raspberry Pi. Let's see. But yeah, as far as kids and STEM and stuff like that, that idea never really, I think, was going to work. But it's a shame that there's less opportunity to goof around on educational projects like that. It's a real shame also that there isn't just a whole bunch of like really good new productivity type apps or any kind of apps in general on phones. Which, yeah, that is sucky because there's plenty of old phones around that you could probably reuse for some other project, but very few people actually do anything with them. Okay. Is there another category of games that we should just automatically close? But I don't think I'd ever actually do that because I'd actually personally like to see the amount of adult games. Here's an example of what was very possibly an adult game that's been censored to be put on Steam, but it is also just a RPG Maker game, so nothing particularly special there. Actually, let's give that one a chance. Yeah, Bunny Garden 2 is getting the full adult concept block on it. Must be 18 plus. Yeah. Opus Prism Peak. South of the circle. Pragmata is out. Yeah. Starting to see more games come out that we already have on the follow list. Give this a chance. Yeah. I'm trying to rush now in particular so I don't end up. Yeah, we have yet another adult game. So it's funny, you have one game getting censored on Steam and then several new adult games, which we haven't been seeing a ton of adult games on Steam outside of the adult section. I kind of felt like that was the better way to do it, is that if something was even slightly questionable, it probably should be in the adult section, but then there should also be a way in which adult section games get promoted and shown to people. That would be the one positive that might come about if all of a sudden age verification just becomes the mandatory thing everywhere, is that you're going to see anybody who claims they are over 18 are going to be advertised adult content a ton more, which I don't know if that really is a great thing, but it would be better for the adult content creators, potentially. You can pick up some quality adventure games in the Humble Golden Tales bundle, which this is a Gaming on Linux article, which means I think all of the articles may be out of order. Oh yeah, this was the one where they have to, it has a whole bunch of poop humor in it. That's why I didn't put it on the follow list. Yeah. Give this a chance. Yeah. Not a fan of the poop humor, fart humor. It can be funny in extremely small doses to me amongst a lot of other comedy, but I mean, it's almost certainly an anti-joke. There's a joke in Supernatural where Castiel the angel gets his power back and he tells somebody to pull his finger, and somebody pulls his finger and he blows up a bunch of windows with his magical powers. So yeah, that would be about the entirety of poop humor and fart humor that I find interesting. Something like Dumb and Dumber, or There's Something About Mary. I found those types of comedies to be pretty stupid. You can get some great tower defense games in the Fresh Humble Bundle. This is why we were seeing tower defense games. Don't know why we're seeing Broken Sword. There is a weird thing, I guess, about this game using AI that I guess all is forgiven at this point. So it might show that ton of pushback, and 2 years is what you get if you use AI. Even if your game is a remake of a beloved game, like Broken Sword 1. But even they have come out and said that the developer that it wasn't worth using AI for all the pushback they got. Which probably is why all is forgiven. It's because they conceded. This is a weird art style. This definitely seems like it's more anime than most. I don't know anything about the politics of Hungary, but apparently 16 years of rulership under one person has come up to an end. I believe it was Hungary which that happened. Oh yeah, and there was a mobile Borderlands game that 2K shadow dropped, if you want to use that phrase. Arguably they probably knew that promoting or advertising it would only hurt it, considering it is just a mobile game out of the Borderlands universe. But yeah, there's probably very little coverage going to come about around that. Didn't find one that didn't support English. I'll have to work on that later. And then we'll do some flawless cleanup here quickly and see if I'm interested in looking at any of this. Yeah, probably I'm not. So yeah, we've kept us nice and tight as far as a live stream. Just about 2 hours and 40 minutes. The first hour just being a warm-up, really. If I could figure out a way to get rid of that in particular, I would. There is definitely a thought to just getting rid of the warm-up section completely. I did have a thought at some point of recording the warm-up section, then hitting go on the live streams once the warm-up section is done, and then having the warm-up section play after I hit a button to the live stream. So putting it at the end instead of the front effectively. And that is still a thought, certainly, but not one I've really given a lot of programming to. Alright, well, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.